Hi class, and welcome back again to my vlog for Films About Painting Spring 2020. And today I will be discussing Jackson Pollock, and I will be answering the questions, what does Jackson's introduction mean? Compare that to his craft statement. In this film you hear our future painter speak and apply paint. How does this change your experience? And does it bother you that these films led to Pollock's downfall? And yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Beginning of the film, like that intro, the narrator says, "It seems to me that the modern painter cannot express this age, the airplane, the atom bomb, and the radio in the old forms of the Renaissance or any past cultures. Each age finds its own technique, and that modern artists have found new ways and new means of making a statement." And I think this goes very much into Pollock's craft statement, because this is when he discusses why he opts to paint in a different way that isn't as much as images. It's more so like these coils that you see on the painting, and it's more feeling rather than what is making you feel that way. And so then another aspect about this is when Pollock says, "My painting is direct. I usually paint on the floor. I enjoy working on a large canvas. I feel more at home, more at ease on a big area." And then he also says, "I like to use a dripping fluid paint. A method of painting is the natural growth out of a need. I want to express my feelings rather than illustrate them. The technique is just a means of arriving at a statement." And so that, to me, shows the correlation where, you know, we're in this modern age of all these things and kind of horrible things, like the atom bomb, terrible thing, and it was invented around this time. And so it's like this unrest, and it's the constant use of the machine. And, you know, we already talked about, you know, we already have the camera. We have the film camera now that can capture images even more, images in motion. So how can painters go beyond that? And I think that's what Pollock is saying, is that he can express his feelings in the ways in which he has this paint land on this canvas, and it's such an unconventional way that he's doing so. And I wanted to talk about, too, because the question asks, like, how does it change your experience when you actually hear the painter and see him apply the paint? I will admit, I didn't think Pollock would sound that, I don't know if bashful is the right word, but he seems very, like, timid, and he's very, like, mumbly and quiet, and maybe, I guess, I just didn't experience that for someone who's, like, flicking this paint. Like, I thought it'd be like, "Oh, yes, I do that. I am the cowboy of painting," like, because they kept calling him the cowboy, but, like, he's really not that. Like, he's very quiet, and that contrasts with what we learned about his alcoholism, and it did change my experience, because I saw Pollock as, like, two different people almost then in my mind, and he was more humanized, and I could sympathize with him more, but also be like, how can this person be this person and someone else? But I guess that's anyone, right? And how he's able to communicate that is through his artwork. And we could see that in, say, Lavender Mist, and I'll pop it up in a minute. But then also, we hear him, or we see him applying the paint, and I guess I just didn't picture it like that, because it almost feels thoughtless, or maybe he just had it so planned out, or he's just so used to doing this technique, he doesn't really have to think about how he's doing it, but maybe just continuously charging everything he does with his feelings. And I wanted to even look into the science behind him doing his art in that way and how it works. And on the article titled "The Science Behind Jackson Pollock's Painting Technique" by Ashley Strickland, and this is from CNN, they state that the researchers, Pollock was able to avoid coiling instability based on the speed of his hand and maintain distance from the canvas and the thickness of the paint that was used. What we found is that he moved his hand at a sufficiently high speed and a sufficiently short height such that this coiling would not occur. Then it said, the researchers said this lack of tight curls in Pollock's work could be used to help identify and authenticate his works. And And I guess when, like, I see that it's, like, the coiling and that they're literally stating it's a high speed and short height, even though we saw that in the film, this is, like, a scientific approach to it, and I guess we could kind of see more of Pollock's actions in what they're stating, and that there's a lot going on. You could tell there's a lot that's, like, pent up in him. Again, considering his alcoholism, he's troubled, and while this may seem like a quiet person, their art could be very loud. And so I'm going to show Lavender Mist, which I think it's so strange it's called lavender, because to me it's not lavender unless I'm, like, missing something. But there's so much going on, and in the film they described it as calm, but to me it's like a chaotic calm. It's not like it's unsettling, it's just like a weird, numbing feeling when you look at it, and I wonder if that's how Pollock might have felt, considering that he was a depressed person. That could be probably valid to make that claim. But yeah, so it was very interesting being able to see him do this, though, and paint, and instead of painting a picture of him in your head, you could see how he was and how he sounded. So kind of answering a couple questions with what I'm about to talk about. I want to discuss both, like, us visually seeing Pollock and hearing him, and in consideration of the stories we heard from his peers, like when Patsy Southgate, who was a writer and friend, said that many of the men in this period would overcompensate poetry and art by being super macho, strong, ugly men, and they weren't cutie pies at all, which I thought that was so funny she said that, with how Pollock kind of came off. I don't want to call him ugly, because I don't call people ugly, but, like, he was, like, a strong, like, looking guy, and didn't really seem approachable, and kind of going into some of, like, the darkness behind him, and also with, like, feeling like you have to reinvent something with a change of the world. Like, when he does say earlier, method of painting is the natural growth out of a need, he hits that stagnant point where he can't create anymore, and I'll talk about all of it, and I think it does have to deal with a little bit of masculinity in there, and feeling like, how can I change from this? How can I express my feelings even more if I'm feeling this depressed? But I'm also going to talk about how the filming of him affected that. So, as we know from the film, that the filming and the drinking led to his limitation of his present style, and he couldn't get past that, and I think the filming of it made him see himself, and I think a lot of people do feel uncomfortable when they see themselves in art, and maybe they just lose interest in what they're making, or they just don't feel like it's good enough anymore, which is really unfortunate, and you run out of inspiration, quite literally, and, you know, this record of his technique from the film, it states that, you know, it was a tragic turning point. So from Recording the Unconscious in Jackson Pollock's work by Ellen von Wiegand from 2017, Ellen says that when Pollock became uninspired by the drip method following his rise to fame, he entered a period of stagnation. He could still create a few marvelous paintings in the coming years, but mostly struggled, eager to find a new voice. After 3 years of sobriety, he once again took up drinking, and finally, in 1954, crashed his car into a tree, ending his life. And that's, you know, very unfortunate and very tragic, and I think it's so hard to see, like, when you're, it does bother me a little that these films affected him that much, because you see the visual of the person, and again, how they're described by people versus how they come off to you in a film. It could be a form of manipulation, or it could be that's just how they are, and sometimes they have bad days, and a lot of people, you know, that's normal, but it does bother me that it made him feel like he wasn't inspired anymore. When so many people saw his art, it's like, wow, like, this is new, these paintings are magnificent, I've never seen anything like it, and this is really changing the game. But I can also see that if you're the one changing the game, you could get bored, because someone else is going to change it too. It's you know, it's a constant thing. You're not the ending point of art, you know? There's always going to be something new, and I think that was difficult, because you kind of have to reinvent yourself quite literally. And again, going back to his quote, a method of painting is the natural growth out of a need, he needed that, and I don't think he could create anything else And that's really sad. And, he lost a way to express himself, and when you can't express yourself, those feelings are all bottled up, and again, that led to his alcoholism because he didn't know how else to get that out. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. But yeah, it does bother me that that happened to him, and it did definitely change my experience that I saw him, instead of just kind of viewing him as like this, like an abstract, no, I don't want to use the word abstract because we're talking about this, but like as like this idea, and it's not like this concrete idea, because he, like, we just watched the video on Dali. Dali was an abstract person, not a concrete person, but obviously Pollock was definitely a concrete person, and we can relate to him, maybe, and feel humility and humanity towards him. And so I think that introduction to the film pretty much means that, like, whatever's going on in the world, the art being made is ultimately influenced by it, no matter what. And you can't argue against that, because it wouldn't make sense. It's like, all these things are happening. It can affect you either consciously or unconsciously. And then compared to his craft statement, it only makes sense that he created his own art form out of his feelings, and when you no longer feel satisfied with that art form, ultimately you no longer feel satisfied with how you're coping with your feelings, and that could be an issue. So yeah, it was hard knowing that these types of films affected him that way, but I'm happy we were able to at least see them and learn about them. But that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching.